So, does this look at all familiar to you? You've just got seeds everywhere at the end of the season. It's time to save them and store them, but where do you begin? It might be seeds that you collected from your garden plants, and it might be seeds that you sowed in your garden, but you didn't use everything in the package. So now, what do you do with these packages? Well, join me today as I show you my methods for saving my seeds and storing my seeds so that they're all ready to use next year when it's time to put them in the ground. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, a master gardener who discusses everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. And what's more important to gardening than understanding seeds? Now, it's really easy. Just go buy a package and put these seeds in the ground and grow that plant and be done with it. But so many of these seed packages have so many seeds that we can't possibly use them in a single season. Or maybe you've grown a plant and you've decided to try to save the seeds so that you can grow the same plant again. That's all great, but you have to understand what is necessary for the seed to be able to save it long enough that you can put them back in the ground. That's just some of what we'll talk about today. How I've collected and saved these seeds, and now the next step, how I'm going to store them so that they're viable, not just for next year, but for many years beyond, because I've got a lot of seeds. The more you garden, the more you're going to want to save your own seeds. And understanding about the seed itself is very important. You can learn a lot from experience, but I suggest adding to your gardening library with some select books like this one, The Complete Guide to Saving Seeds. And I'll put a link to it in the description below. It really is a complete guide. I've been saving seeds for years and years, and I learned when I read this book. It's great for beginners, intermediates, and experts, not just saving seeds, but every aspect, from the botany to the temperatures that you need when it comes to having the seeds viable for as long as possible. Collecting the seeds from your garden plants is pretty easy, but as you start to save them, there are some important factors that you really should understand. Chief among them are temperature and humidity. Now, we want our seeds to be as dry as possible so that they'll store for a long time. We should target the internal moisture level of the seeds to be below 10%. Well, the problem is I don't have the equipment, and I'm guessing you don't have the equipment to actually measure what the moisture level is of our seeds. So instead, we need to give them time to dry. I encourage that you leave the seeds on your plant as long as possible, like with these Napa cabbage pods. I allowed them to dry on the plant in the sun. The sun does a great job drying out the seeds. But once you collect them and bring them inside, now the temperature and the humidity really become important factors. In an area like mine, it's easy. During the summer, my air humidity is often in single digits. So all I have to do is put them in paper bags or sandwich bags and allow them to dry naturally, which they'll do in a relatively short amount of time. But if you live in an area with higher humidity, you probably need to take some extra steps. You need to drive down that moisture content within the seed. And that won't happen if it's hot and humid. And that's where a relationship to understand comes in. Hotter air holds more moisture. Colder air holds less moisture. So one way to help dry your seeds is to actually take these bags and place them in your refrigerator. Your refrigerator has cool air, which means the humidity is lower in your refrigerator than most places in your house. That may not be enough. You may actually need to expose these seeds to an area that's been dehumidified. So if you have a room in your house with a dehumidifier, that's the room you should put your seeds in to dry out. Another thing to help, is to use silica gel packets. These little desiccant packets that come in electronics, they can work well to try to dry out the seeds. Whichever method you use, that's our goal. Dry seeds before we even begin to talk about storage. I start off by putting my seeds in these paper bags generally. And most of the seeds that I save tend to come from pods, like these turnip seeds. Separating the seeds from the pods is relatively easy, and I've got other videos where I show how to collect the seeds from individual plants, and I'll have many more videos to come. After you separate the seeds from these dried pods, it doesn't mean that the seeds are ready to go and immediately go into storage. There's still some more drying that should take place, because we don't have the equipment to measure it. So assume that they'll dry pretty well within the pod, and then assume that you'll have to break apart the pod and then save the individual seeds for another brief period just to help drive that moisture down. It doesn't matter if you collect your seeds from pods or, as I show in my carrot and my cilantro videos, directly from the flowers themselves. This next step is to decide what container you're going to put your seeds in. Now, I like jars, and I save many of the jars that I use around the kitchen to hold my seeds, like this little one for the turnip seeds. One reason I like the jars is because it's really easy to take these desiccant packages, put them in the jar, and that'll help keep the seeds dry or even get drier if there's any moisture left in them. Now, you could just as easily use sandwich bags, though freezer bags work better because they've got thicker plastic. I've recently discovered these individual seed envelopes. These are reusable, and they're the same size as the packages that I buy at the store or from nurseries or online. So when I store my seeds, I have to think about how I'm going to store them. By putting them in a reusable envelope like this, I can store my garden seeds just like I store those packages that I've bought. I do like these, but one of the problems with glass is if you knock it off the shelf, it can break and the seeds go everywhere. And that happened one year with a big jar of veg seeds. And I was picking up veg seeds from the floor for years after that. Plastic bags are kind of the same way. They're easy to store, but they can often get overlooked, and I've had bags thrown away because family members didn't realize the importance of what was in this bag as much as I did. So decide what works best for you. And once you've decided on the container, it's a great idea to label for what the seeds are inside. At a minimum, the type of plant, the variety, and the year that you collected the seeds. Chances are you're just doing this for yourself, so that might be all you need. But if you're planning on giving away some of these seeds, include as much information as you can. Or if you've got a lot of similar varieties, it might help to include yellow flower or red flower or other characteristics so you can identify at a glance just exactly what the seeds are. So when it comes time to plant, you know what's inside. As I discussed in a previous video on how to organize your seeds, I organize using a few different methods during the growing season, using cardboard boxes and plastic boxes, like this one, which are the seeds that I actually put into my garden this year. And these are seeds that I started indoors and then put the plants outside. And some of these packages are empty, but I've kept the package so I knew what it was that I put in the garden or started indoors. But when it comes time to store through the off season to prepare for spring, these cardboard boxes and loosely organized plastic boxes don't work as well. You can use methods like this, but as I showed in that video, I discovered this. And so this is what I'm going to use moving forward with the seed packages that I'll reuse for the spring. I'll be storing my seeds a little bit differently this year, using this big box. And within this box are smaller boxes for storing the individual seed packets? Much depends on how many seeds you're storing and the specific location where you're storing the seeds. Now, this is a great way to organize seeds, but this is how I saved my seeds through the winter for years and years, just using cardboard boxes like this. Until one year, I had a rodent problem. I didn't even know I had mice, but the mice knew that I had seeds. And I discovered most of the seeds were eaten because the mice were feasting through the winter. If you've got a rodent problem, you might want to consider something that's fully enclosed, like the jars or these plastic bins. If you don't have a lot of seeds, well, you can get by with smaller storage. A medium-sized tub like this may be able to hold everything that you need. I like the organization, and I've got enough seeds that I'll need a bigger container like this. If you have an area that might be prone to water damage, well, the cardboard box and the open seed packages could sustain some damage if water finds its way in. Another reason why I like to use the plastic, because I store my seeds in the basement. And even though I haven't had any flooding issues, you just never know. And the plastic will offer that little bit of extra protection. A small container or a big container, it all comes down to how many seeds you have and how many seeds you're going to store. Now let's talk more about the environment where you're going to store your seeds. Basically, you're looking for a cool, dark, dry location. And most houses have at least one spot in a closet or a basement, because the first part, the temperature, can be quite important. Most of us are just looking to save seeds into the next year, and next year we'll collect more seeds and just keep that process going. Well, most cool household temperatures, like 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 16 degrees Celsius, will easily allow the seeds to remain viable for at least a year or two. If you can store in cooler temperatures, the seeds will last longer. So at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, the seeds will actually last twice as long as that higher household temperature. And the cooler you get, the longer the seeds will last. So if you have some very special seeds and you have a large number of them and you know you'll be using them over a period of years, it might be best that you store those seeds in the refrigerator. I don't recommend for most of us to store our seeds in the freezer. First, we typically don't need to save seeds for that long. And secondly, we really don't know if we were able to dry the seed to the point to get the moisture level as low as it needs to be. And if the moisture level of the seed is too high, there's too much moisture in the seed, and you put it in your freezer, well, as those cells expand in the freezer, you could damage or kill the seeds. So I just stay completely away from the freezer, but I do store seeds in the refrigerator. As far as choosing a dark location, there are a couple issues to consider as well. If you're storing in glass jars or clear plastic containers, you don't want to expose the seeds to direct sunlight. The UV rays from the sun can damage the seeds, and you don't want that. The sun or direct light can also cause the temperature within a container like this to rise. And as we just discussed with the temperature, we don't want it any higher than it needs to be. So a dark location tends to be cooler, which is why we want to focus on that. And as far as the dryness of the location where we're storing our seeds, we want to try to keep the seeds dry. We went to all that effort to dry them out. Well, why let them get moist again through storage? Consider the desiccant package, but keep it dry. Keep it sealed. Keep any excess humidity away from these seeds if at all possible. And just like we were drying in an environment with a dehumidifier, if you have one of those, you might want to store your seeds in the same type of location so that they're not damaged and they stay dry until you sow them again in the spring. I think it's easy to save and store seeds, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. And a big reason why I like this complete guide to saving seeds is because it covers not only everything that I've talked about in this video, but much more in more detail. It covers 322 different plants and trees and discusses about saving and storing those seeds. And while I've talked about the concerns with high humidity, as the book points out, it really only takes 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 40% humidity to drive the moisture level of the seeds down to an ideal 8%. And you may find that your refrigerator at close to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with a dry humidity could be the ideal location for you to not only dry your seeds, but store your seeds. So consider checking out this book. I really love it. If you like this video, well then consider giving it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with others who might benefit. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.